Hello friends, welcome. Friends, I don't know whether you have seen this headline. This was published on 16th of June 2025. So this is light reading, which speaks about Mavenir boss regrets open RAN bet in U-turn after financial issues. A debt to equity swap keeps the company alive, but with a much narrower focus outside the market for open RAN radio. Now, friends, this article looks as if that Open RAN as a concept has failed, right? Because this is the flavor which kind of gives, this headline gives. And then it kind of says that, Mavenir is now going to be focused on a very narrow, area of Open RAN, and then leave aside all the hardware development part that they were doing. So it comes as a shock to those proponents who were thinking that Open RAN is going to bail the operators out from lock-in to a single vendor and will enable a lot of innovation both at the core as well as the edge. And that will make the networks more empowering from the point of view of innovation, and service delivery is going to become more efficient. That was the whole idea of Open RAN. And I had done many articles and videos on Open RAN. You can see that one of my article which I wrote on 9 September 2023 explains Open RAN, the architecture, how this is different from physical RAN. So I will paste a link of this article in the description so you can read this article if you are interested. So this video is not about explaining Open RAN architecture. This is more about the narrative that Open RAN as a concept is failing. And that is why, friends, I am doing this video to explain that what is going on, under the hood. And how should you read this Mavenir exit from the hardware business and focusing on the software business? So friends, I have done a slide deck, which is going to lay out the overall narrative. So let's go step by step. The title of this slide deck is Open RAN, Mavenir's Pivot and the Road to 6G. So it is a simplified industry narrative for general audience. So that's the whole purpose of this presentation. So Mavenir has exited the hardware business. So is it the end of Open RAN or strategic reboot? So the sequence of event is that just recently in June 2025, Mavenir has exited the mobile tower equipment business after heavy loss. It was actually incurring a lot of debt, and in order to make the company more viable from a business point of view, it had to exit certain capex heavy investments, right, which required a lot of money to invest. Cash was required, so there were a lot of money to be borrowed from outside, and that business they have exited, and now they are going to focus on software business. Now if you look at the CEO of Mavenir, what he says as per the light reading article, that we bet on Open RAN in a heavy way, that was a mistake. Now this also gives an impression that Open RAN as a concept is a complete failure. Otherwise, this whole point about that was a mistake means what, right? That is the perception people will get. So headline calls this as a blow to Open RAN, but is this the end or simply a shift in strategy? Now, maybe a company CEO may perceive this as a complete failure of their strategic alignment, as a vision going forward. So that is the way they might put it. But the whole sentence, if you look at the sentence, probably what he means is that putting all their eggs in one basket and creating a platform end to end with hardware as well as software is like emulating the vendors of legacy vendors like Nokia and Ericsson. So if you are going to have a complete solution end to end with hardware and software, then how different you are from Nokia and Ericsson, who were also doing the same. So therefore, the whole concept of Open RAN is that the hardware can come from any vendor, right? And the software also can come for any vendor, and there has to be an integrator, SI, which integrates everything together. So that was the concept, right? The idealistic concept of Open RAN. So if Mavenir is building an end-to-end network, right, with hardware and software, so it's emulating the same thing which Ericsson and Nokia was already doing in past in a conventional RAN. Therefore, it is very important to investigate this whole news and the implication on the Open RAN industry going forward as a concept, and whether we are going to leverage this or we continue to grow in the direction which we are growing right now, which is legacy RAN, where the vendor interfaces are all proprietary and the hardware is proprietary, and the whole thing end to end has to be managed by the same vendor whose equipment you are buying, as well as the spares will also come from the same vendor. So you're locked in, right, to the vendor. And Open RAN was to emancipate the operators from this lock-in situation. That was the whole idea. Now, what Mavenir exit really means. So let's discuss this and understand this. So Mavenir will no longer build physical equipment like antennas, towers, equipment, all the things which kind of goes into building Open RAN end-to-end network. Instead, it will focus on core software that controls mobile network, tools that optimize how the network behave using AI, helping operator connect equipment from different vendors, right? So it is not quitting Open RAN, it is returning to its core strength software. Now, friends, let me give you an analogy, right? A physical analogy, which when I was in Qualcomm, I really experienced, right? So Qualcomm, is not into hardware business, right? But when it developed the CDMA technology, in order to push the CDMA technology forward so that people can see the proof of concept, it actually developed equipment. It did manufacturing and it put out all the network equipment to show that how CDMA network can perform and how CDMA is more efficient than GSM. And later, when the whole ecosystem started moving forward and people adopted the technology, when they saw the proof of concept, then Qualcomm just unwinded their hardware business and then focused on a fabless business and start innovating on technology and to make the standard better and more empowering. To me, it looks to me that Mavenir was also trying to do the same thing, because Mavenir core expertise was software integration, end-to-end integration, not probably the hardware business. It tried to push the hardware to expedite the adoption of Open RAN. And where it failed, because the operators are not willing to expedite the adoption on Open RAN because of various reasons. And we are going to discuss that as we move forward in this presentation. So, and it in the process accumulated huge debt. And in order to make the company more efficient and profitable, it had to exit the hardware business and focus on the software business. Now, instead of driving Open RAN on its own through the hardware by deploying hardware and creating a network end to end to show, the proof, to the operator community that it can actually work. Instead of relying on that strategy, now it is going to rely on other people doing innovation on hardware, and it is going to start imposing software on top of others people hardware who will be developing to create an end-to-end network which can be managed and controlled by Mavenir software running on other vendors' hardware. I think that's what is going to happen in the future. So it is going to let the Open RAN development go on its own space, and is going to follow that development and is going to start building software on top of the hardware, right? To do an end-to-end integration. So that's the strategy that Mavenir is going to play. So the plug and play of Open RAN dream is over. So what was the concept of Open RAN? If you look at my article, when I wrote this article basically talks about how Open RAN is going to bring lot of advantages to the operator community. These are the advantages. Open interface, we can basically do plug and play. You can buy off-the-shelf hardware, and those can work in a seamless manner. So the operators will have more leverage from a buying point of view. Pricing leverage now will rest on the operators rather than on the vendor, because as soon as you get locked into a particular vendor, what happens is the vendor can charge whatever they want to on spares and other maintenance contract. They will give you the hardware cheap, but everything. So in order to emancipate themselves from this whole locking situation, the operators really wanted the Open RAN to go forward in time, and that was the vision everybody was looking forward towards. But somehow it did not happen. So if you look at this chart, what I'm basically saying is the plug and play Open RAN dream is over. Why? Because even if the hardware is vendor specific. The software has to be laid on top of the hardware, and it has to integrate the hardware in one single monolithic equipment, end-to-end equipment network. Because if it doesn't do that, then the services cannot get delivered on that network, and the operators do not have the capability to do all the integration on their own. So they had to rely on somebody to do the integration, so that if there is a problem, somebody will have the expertise to take care of the problem, and therefore the network can function without any failure, right? That is the whole idea. So the initial idea was a mix and match of gears from different vendors, and it just works, which I explained. But the reality is that the different vendor interprets standards in different ways, right? Timing and coordinations are tough. Mixing component needs deep testing and tuning. And so Open RAN will still be open, but it is not going to be truly plug and play. That is clear now, friends, that because if it was plug and play, who is going to take the responsibility to ensure that the integration is seamless? If there is some software upgradation happening from one equipment to one vendor to another vendor, who is going to keep tab of all this development, right? It is going to be extremely important. So the integration now is the new lock-in. Earlier, what was happening? Ericsson and Nokia was locked in. So if you have deployed a network using either Ericsson and network or a Nokia equipment in a particular service area, you can't really mix and match, equipment from different vendors. It was like you are locked into Ericsson or you are locked into Nokia. So the design was that you give certain circles to Ericsson, certain circles to Nokia, certain circles to Huawei, so that in that particular area, you have to remain with the network. So if some vendor malfunctions or does not deliver, then you swap that vendor out and you say that, okay, I'm not going to remove their equipment, I'm going to put Nokia's equipment. For example, if Ericsson is not functioning properly, you put Nokia's equipment, but you are locked into a particular vendor. You really cannot have this plug and play concept in the legacy vendor. Now, in case of Open RAN also, the new lock-in is the software. Because the software is the layer which integrates the hardware, which could be from different vendors, right? So if the hardware is going to be from different vendor, you have to have a layer of software which integrates the hardware in one single monolithic block. And that is where Mavenir's role is going to be pretty important. So if you see here, the operators don't want to play system builder. They want the reliable networks. Vendors like Mavenir can now handle this integration. That's why software is so important, friends. So the quote from Ericsson's executive was that using different vendors sound good, but it creates an operational chaos, which is very, very clear. And it is clearly understood that the operational chaos is real, right? So Mavenir will now become the new middleware who tries everything together. And that's why the software play is very, very important, right? Because Open RAN means you have to integrate different pieces of network coming from different vendors with different kind of interfaces. Unless you have the software layer built in, which is optimized in such a way that the whole integration works, then the whole system is going to fail and collapse. An operator who is selling services doesn't have the capability to do this work themselves. Okay. So why Mavenir will become new Ericsson, which I've already kind of given you a preview. So let's talk about this. In past, Ericsson and Nokia gave everything hardware, software, and maintenance. Open RAN enables the operators to buy hardware from various vendors cheaper, but they still need a company to run the software, keep things working together, provide upgrade and fixes, and that company will be Mavenir-like company. There could be other options, but Mavenir can play this role, right? That is where they are building themselves up in that direction, and therefore they have exited the hardware business. So while the hardware got cheaper, the operators are now locked into the software and support contract. Because if you hire Mavenir to develop the software, to integrate the complete hardware that you have bought from different vendors, you cannot just overnight dismantle Mavenir software, right? You need to get locked into the Mavenir for all their upgrades and maintenance end to end, so that the hardware works seamlessly as an integrated network, so that services can be delivered. So it kind of still emulates the earlier legacy in Ericsson and Nokia, where you locked in for Ericsson and Nokia for all kinds of optimization of network and fault recovery of network. So the hardware got cheaper, operators are now locked into software support contract just like before, but in different form. So what has really changed for the operators means what is that it is going to bring to the table, the Open RAN is going to bring on the table for the operators. No longer stuck with one vendor for all hardware. You can have the hardware off the shelf, but that integration of the hardware will be done by a company called Mavenir, right? Similar company like Mavenir will do the integration. So they are now reliant on few players for integration and software. Operator must choose a vendor combination wisely, pay ongoing integration and software, pay for ongoing integration and software update, except that the switching software integrator midway will be difficult. It will be very difficult. You can't say that I am going to uproot Mavenir and I'm going to put Rakuten or somebody else, some integrator who can integrate the software. It's not possible because you are already optimized and the network is live. Services are running on the network. So that creates a lock-in situation for companies like Mavenir, right? So why Open RAN still matters, especially for 6G. Though Open RAN development might have slowed down, but as the network becomes more, prone towards 6G, driven towards 6G, so that the optimization of the network and the new innovations at different points are required, so that networks become self-learning to using AI, artificial intelligence. The optimization becomes also self-aware. So all this will require a huge amount of innovation at different points on the network. Now, if you have a vendor who gives the hardware end to end, then the innovation cycle is going to slow down because one vendor cannot do all the innovation. For that, you have to rely on multiple vendors. So Open RAN, from an innovation point of view, from an hardware innovation point of view, still actually is very, very real. And this is the natural course which is going to happen as you move forward from 5G to 5.5G to 6G. There is no other recourse. You can't rely on a single vendor for hardware. So that hardware innovation is extremely important as we move forward to 6G. So the integration of the hardware, as I've been saying, has to be done by companies like Mavenir. So 6G will become more faster. 6G will be more than just faster. Means 6G is not just faster speed. It will be smarter, flexible, and software driven. It will need AI tools to adjust network in real time, radios that can also sense surroundings like for drone, factories, etc. For more edge locations, dynamic control, energy efficient behavior managed automatically. Traditional vendor locked in system can't evolve this fast. Means the hardware, if it is locked in, it can't evolve that fast. So Open RAN allows different companies to innovate and independently, and therefore it kind of hasten the cycle of innovation. It is messy today, but it is the only way forward for building networks, 6G network that is going to come in the future. So don't mistake growing pain for failure. Means there is pain right now because Mavenir has taken a step backward, right? But this is not failure because we have already seen in past, like Linux, it was a mess. Earlier, Linux system nobody used to use. Now the whole system, the whole companies are run on Linux. It has stabilized to such an extent. So like Linux on the early internet, Open RAN is still maturing. It will keep on maturing. And this is the way to move forward, right? The conventional way is not going to give you the same kind of empowerment, in technology like 6G. Mavenir stepping away from hardware is a smart correction, not a collapse. We were moving from hardware-led competition to software-led control, right? Vendor black boxes to modular testable components. Open RAN is not perfect, but it is the right foundation for smarter network. So this is the slide which kind of compares, right? Traditional network versus Open RAN. Who does what now? Function core processing, traditional network, vendor design chips. Open RAN will be off-the-shelf chips. Example: Qualcomm, Intel, Marvell. Tower equipment, one vendor hardware, mixed low-cost hardware. Then we have these vendors. Software, network software tied to hardware vendor, modular software platform. Then we have these vendors. System management built in, done by third-party integrators. We have Mavenir and others. Radisson, AI-based control, vendor-defined app like modular plug-and-play, Juniper, VMware, Mavenir, etc. So you can imagine the role that Mavenir will play in near future to enable these kind of networks to become more empowering and enable technology like 6G. So Open RAN was what was promised and what we have got, because the whole concept of Open RAN is that you buy an hardware and just do a plug and play and the whole thing is going to work. It's not going to happen in this manner. The promise was that everything works together easily. The reality is that needs extensive testing and custom setup. So the promise was you will have more freedom, true in theory, but integration limits switching. Means once you have deployed Mavenir's network, you can't just replace it to by Radisson overnight. Hardware will be cheaper, but the software support cost will remain high, because once you locked in on Mavenir, they can charge license fee and the running cost of maintenance cost of the network on an ongoing basis, which you can't escape. You cannot say that, I'm not going to pay. So, or you may have long-term contract, that's a different point, but you have to keep on paying, just like spares, right? Once you have locked in for Ericsson and in Nokia, you need to buy spares from only those vendors. Big vendor will lose dominance, but still, they will still need performance, scale, and integration. Innovation will be rapid, slower than expected, and complex. Now, in case of Open RAN also, because of this lock-in nature of the software integrator, the operators will have to follow the same strategy that they are adopting today. That in some of the circles, you choose a particular vendor like Mavenir, right? And limit that part of the network which runs on Mavenir. And then on the other part of their network, you can have Radisson doing all the hardware integration. So hardware is all open. You buy the hardware, but the software integration, just like you have got different RAN vendors, which are, segmented in your network in different geographies, so that you have at least some leverage. If somebody start misbehaving, you can plan a strategy to uproot that vendor completely. Similar strategy you will have to adopt going forward in near future, but Open RAN is the way to go, because that is going to enable technologies like 6G. The conventional way, these technologies will not get enabled, and more empowering, because one vendor which is developing all the hardware cannot do all the innovation. That's all I wanted to say in this video, friends. I hope that you like this video, and thanks for watching till the end, and I'll come back with a new video and a new topic next time. Thank you very much, friends.